Jerry, Jerry. Oh, you can just hear it.
You can hear it, right? And that isn't just some audience chant. It's this primal, guttural scream that's just woven into the fabric of our culture.
Totally. When everything goes wrong in public, when a family just completely loses the plot, we don't say, what a spectacle anymore.
No. We say, it was a Jerry Springer moment. The man literally became an adjective. He became cultural shorthand for, I don't know, chaos with a velvet rope around it.
And that transformation right there is our deep dive today. How the host becomes the word for a whole genre of human breakdown. We're going way beyond a simple biography of, Gerald Norman Springer.
Yeah, we dissecting the architecture of spectacle itself.
Exactly. And the big tension for me is, was he this cynical media manipulator building an empire on pure exploitation? Or was he like this accidental pioneer who finally gave visibility to people that regular media just pretended didn't exist?
That's the core question. We're looking at how a serious, an idealistic politician who once worked for Robert F. Kennedy.
Which is wild to even think about. It's insane how that guy becomes the king of trash TV. And more importantly, how the methods he perfected, the public confessions, the engineered fights, the actual brawls, how that gave us the code for the outrage-driven media landscape we're all frankly drowning in today. We need to know where the script for all this modern confrontation was written.
And we have so much to work with. Our source material covers his political start, the infamous check scandal, the really dark backstage tactics from producers.
For tragic legal stuff, yeah, including 2 major lawsuits. And then the absolute bewilderment of Jerry Springer. The opera, it's this huge, chaotic mess of a story. So let's unpack it. And you have to start at the beginning. You can't understand the architect of all this spectacle until you understand the very serious man who first walked into that ring. His roots are just so profoundly grounded in tragedy and vulnerability.
They really are. I mean, his life began so far from a TV studio. It's rooted in, the deepest possible historical chaos. Jerry Springer was born in London in February 1944.
Literally in a tube station during the Blitz.
In a tube station. His parents were Jewish refugees who had just escaped Germany. So the foundation of his entire identity is built on escaping an existential threat.
That's such a crucial piece of context. The source material is vivid on this. His maternal grandmother died at Chimno extermination camp.
And his paternal grandmother at Theresienstadt. So just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
He grew up understanding human tragedy not as some abstract thing in a history book, but as this direct family wound.
Yeah.
He inherited this story that is just rooted in profound public state-sanctioned vulnerability. So my question is, how does someone who comes from that kind of high-stakes life or death exposure then handle, self-made public chaos later?
It suggests maybe an uncomfortable familiarity with it. Like he understood how fragile a reputation is, how quickly calamity can hit.
Exactly.
And he definitely didn't start his career frivolously. He grew up in Queens, got a law degree from Northwestern, and then boom, he's in high-level politics. He's an aide for Robert F. Kennedy's 1968 presidential campaign.
We're talking about, the heart of American political idealism in the 60s. I mean, these were serious, principled beginnings.
He took that right to Cincinnati. He served on the city council, then was briefly the mayor from 77 to 78, and even back then he was known for being a little unconventional.
A gonzo politician, they called him.
Yeah. He did these populist stunts like staying a night in jail to highlight prison conditions, or he commandeered a city bus once when the service got chaotic. So even the early showmanship was tied to this, civic duty.
A desire for transparency.
But that whole trajectory just slams into this humiliating brick wall in 1974. And this is where the analysis of branding, for me, really begins. The reason for his resignation from the city council was admitting to soliciting a prostitute.
And the detail. The detail is what makes it so. Springer.
He paid with 2 personal checks. One in December 73, another in January 74. A personal check.
I have to pause on that. A city council member, this idealist, paying a sex worker with a personal check, it's so self-defeating, it's laughable. It speaks to either a level of naivete that is just absurd, or, and this is what you're hinting at, I think, some weird, maybe subconscious need to leave a literal paper trail to make sure he got caught.
Why else would you use the one method that guarantees the truth will come out?
Exactly. And that detail, paying with a check, it wasn't just stupid. In hindsight, it was a masterful, maybe even accidental branding move. Look at the timeline. He contacts the FBI voluntarily after the payments were discovered, so he gets ahead of it.
He got way ahead of it. He resigned from the council, held a news conference where he sort of alluded to the investigation. He didn't wait to be exposed. He exposed himself.
He weaponized his own transparency.
100%.
Yeah.
When he ran for re-election in 1975, his TV ads addressed the scandal head-on. He basically stood there and said, I messed up. I have human failings, but I am not afraid of the truth, even if it hurts.
And this is the post-Watergate era, right? People are so cynical about politics.
Exactly. So the public respected the honesty. They saw him as human and resilient, not another hypocrite hiding something.
And they voted him back in by a landslide.
By a landslide. It's the ultimate example of failing up. It built this specific persona, the flawed but honest guy, that he would cash in on for the next 50 years. It's an early demo of how admitting your shame can actually generate more public support than having a perfect, clean reputation.
Yeah, and that's a playbook we still see today, though maybe with less personal skin in the game. You know, people in public life, they always try to hide the failure or spin it.
Right, they try to manage the narrative.
But that clean route just leaves you so vulnerable, doesn't it? Because if you're pretending you're perfect, the second the smallest secret gets out, the whole thing just collapses. Springer learned early, if you tell everyone the worst thing about yourself, what's left for them to do to you?
You can't hurt him with his own history. He's already shown it to you.
Yeah.
I've definitely had moments in my career where I had to choose between staying quiet and just exposing a massive failure.
Oh, God, that feeling.
Years ago, I was on this big project, and I realized about halfway through, I had fundamentally misunderstood a core part of it. It was going to be a complete disaster.
So what do? Do you try to bury it and fix it in secret, or do you just stand up and say, I broke this? The anxiety must have been insane.
It was paralyzing, but I chose the honesty route. I went to the clients and said, look, this is fundamentally flawed, and it's my fault. The shame, the sleepless nights, it was awful. But the second I stopped trying to spin it and just owned it, their reaction was surprisingly calm.
They respected the admission.
Yeah. It's that emotional aikido you mentioned, using the force of the attack against itself.
And that's the difference between shame and vulnerability, right? Shame keeps you quiet, keeps you isolated. But vulnerability, when you share it, it creates a connection. Springer used his vulnerability to connect with voters. That I'm one of you authenticity is exactly what fueled his talk show, even when the content got, well, deliberately insane.
He cemented this idea that he understood human failing from the inside out. And that brings us right to the big pivot, the architectural shift that gave birth to the spectacle we all know.
Yeah, because the original Jerry Springer show, when it debuted in 1991, was completely unrecognizable. It was a clone of Donahue. Serious, issues-oriented.
So boring. The set was basic. The topics were intellectual. He even wore glasses to look more like a statesman.
They had political guests, serious journalists. The topics were like homelessness, the effects of rock music.
Even had G.G. Allen on, the infamous punk rocker.
Mm-hmm.
But he was there to talk about his life, not to, throw a chair at someone.
But the ratings were just in the toilet. They were at the bottom of the daytime talk show pile.
And that commercial pressure, that was the trigger. By '94, the distributor, Multimedia, was threatening to cancel the whole thing. This is the moment. This is when Richard Dominic comes in as the new executive producer, and the mission was simple. Save this show by any means necessary. And Dominic, he understood conflict. He oversaw this drastic pivot to what the industry called tabloidish sensationalism. The whole menu changed overnight.
The subjects just went hard into adultery, transsexuality, hate groups. The security staff said the KKK episodes were a logistical nightmare.
Incestuous relationships, and of course the absurd. It all culminated in episodes like I Married a Horse.
And the big structural change was in late '94, when they started featuring physical fights on stage for the very first time.
And it worked. It became a phenomenon. By 1998, it was getting 8 million viewers and beating Oprah in a lot of major markets.
Mm-hmm.
But this success, this is where that core conflict we talked about really crystallizes. Was this just calculated exploitation, or was it some kind of radical democratic expression?
I get why you call it exploitation. I think that's where most people land, honestly.
From my perspective, this was the moment the attention economy was packaged and sold to the masses. I call it the WWE comparison.
Okay, lay it out.
The show basically formalized the idea of packaging boorish, violent behavior as entertainment. Producers flat out admitted they encouraged guests to be as confrontational as possible. The chaos was choreographed. Producers later said the fights were directly inspired by WWE storylines.
And the sources back that up. They booked professional wrestlers. They hired ex-cops like Steve Wilkos to be security, specifically to contain the violence. This wasn't accidental. It was a controlled explosion.
It was a stage where producers had a fight quota.
Yeah. This whole dynamic, Scripted beefs contained rage, moral ambiguity, presented as reality. It basically coded the political and media landscape we live in today. We learned to expect conflict as the main event.
Yeah.
And look at Springer himself. He's in the aisle, pacing, wearing his nice suit, never cursing, physically protected from all of it. He was the clean, detached ringmaster of a circus he engineered. Okay, but I have to push back on the fake or cynical label here. Because while the staging, the confrontation, yes, that was manufactured. But the emotions, the people, they were absolutely real. I think we need to look at the show as an emotional public sphere.
Okay, define that for us. What does that mean in the context of Springer?
It's an academic idea, but it basically argues that the show provided a space, one of the only spaces in mainstream media, where the messy, personal lives of marginalized people were aired publicly without a filter from some elite commentator.
Right.
The sources say the show actively recruited vulnerable people, a lot of them from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. They even called it the Springer Triangle, parts of Ohio, Georgia, and Tennessee.
These are people who usually only show up on the news as a statistic or a victim.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this was the first time regular people from those places got a national voice, even if that voice was screaming and throwing chairs. And Springer defended this constantly. He'd say, "We're all alike, we just dress better." He argued the show was more democratic than the news because it was voluntary. You chose to come on and tell your truth no matter how messy.
I get the democracy argument, the power of being seen.
Mm-hmm.
But that raw emotion wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was being amplified by the audience, which was, a key part of the architecture. The live audience was the fuel.
They were the psychological engine room for sure. The audience acted as the amplifier. They'd break out into those howls, the chants of Jerry, 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 and just incite more escalation. They turned personal misery into mass entertainment.
And that engine runs on something academics call vicarious embarrassment. VE. We have to define this because it explains why we couldn't stop watching.
Vicarious embarrassment is that painful, cringy feeling you get when you see someone else just completely violate a social norm, even though it has nothing to do with you. Psychologically, when we watch these things, the sheeting revelations, the fights, it triggers the empathy and theory of mind parts of our brain, often the same parts involved in feeling pain or disgust.
So we cringe, it hurts a little, but we keep watching. Why?
Because the psychological pull is huge. By watching and judging someone else's dysfunction, we're basically running simulations in our own heads. We're thinking, what would I do? Which can make us feel better equipped for our own lives. And crucially, it lets us feel morally superior.
It's a guaranteed dopamine hit from judging someone else's chaos.
Yeah.
And that model isn't just for daytime TV. It's the currency of social media today. When you scroll past a public meltdown on TikTok, you're engaging in vicarious embarrassment. You are consuming drama to feel better about your own stable life.
And the Springer show perfected that cycle. The audience was the collective moral compass, validating the viewer at home. But we can't forget that while it was a brilliantly engineered spectacle, this architecture had a profound and sometimes tragic human cost.
So if that was the cynical architecture, we have to talk about the actual tangible cost.
Yeah.
The moral responsibility when the spectacle bleeds into real life.
And the way the show operated backstage just reveals this deep, cynical exploitation. We know producers admitted to goading guests, getting them amped up and angry before they even hit the stage. They knew volatility equaled ratings. They were entertainers, not therapists.
It was more than just emotional manipulation, though. The source material has these detailed allegations that producers would sometimes threaten to withhold return plane tickets if guests tried to back out of a segment.
That's horrifying.
These were often poor, vulnerable people flown in for a day. They were completely reliant on the show to get back home to the Springer Triangle.
That power imbalance is just,
It's disgusting. You take vulnerable people, fly them across the country, manipulate them into a fight for ratings, and then use their only way home as leverage to keep them on stage. You're weaponizing their poverty for cheap content.
The only thing stopping total anarchy was the security team, led by Steve Wilkos, who was a former Chicago cop. And Wilkos confirmed it. He said while the chaos was sometimes exaggerated, the physical aggression was real. His job was to contain it, to provide this environment where people could let go emotionally, but within these strict boundaries. The security was the barrier that let the theatrical rage happen safely.
But sometimes control failed, and the consequences were terminal. Which brings us to the tragedy of Nancy Campbell Panitz. This case just challenges the entire moral foundation of the show.
The details are just harrowing. Nancy appeared on a May 2000 episode called Secret Mistresses Confronted. She was on with her ex-husband, Ralph Panitz, and his new girlfriend.
Right.
The show was taped in April, but the murder happened just hours after it aired in May. Nancy was found dead. Ralph had choked and beaten her to death, apparently after the on-air humiliation made an argument about him moving out escalate.
The direct cause and effect is murky, but for her family, the connection was undeniable. Her sons filed a massive lawsuit in 2002. They claimed the show negligently created a mood that led to murder by inciting conflict and then just sending them off without any protection or aftercare.
And even though the show won the lawsuit on a technicality, they argued they couldn't be held responsible for what a murderer did away from their set. The moral failure is absolute. The production was focused only on conflict for entertainment, with zero priority on care for the guests. And this is where my cynical media control brain kicks in. The producers had this perfect defense mechanism, the lack of script, which they called Detail 1. Detail 1 was their legal shield.
By insisting that the conflicts weren't explicitly scripted, that the words and the violence were spontaneous, even if the premise was manufactured, they could argue they weren't legally liable for the genuine catastrophic consequences. It was a technicality that let them hide behind the authenticity of the rage they provoked.
That is so infuriating. You're playing with people's lives for ratings, exploiting their raw trauma, and then hiding behind a technicality that says the words weren't written down for them. That is such a profound failure of basic human decency.
And that architecture of conflict followed Springer even when he tried to pivot back to his legal roots with Judge Jerry.
Oh yeah, the drama did not stay on the talk show stage. In 2021, a guy named James Poppy sued Judge Jerry. He'd been on the court show to settle a dispute with another guy, Sean Landons.
This was supposed to be serious, legally binding arbitration. But what happened?
After the show awarded damages to Landons, he followed Pappy out to the parking lot of the studio and just beat him senseless. Broken jaw, broken nose, broken teeth.
And the lawsuit claimed the security knew. They knew the show created this adversarial environment, and they failed to separate them. They knew that with the history of the Jerry Springer show, a physical fight was a totally reasonable, even expected outcome.
The expectation of violence was part of the brand, even in a courtroom setting.
It shows that the spectacle was baked into the production itself, no matter the format.
Yeah.
You walk into that studio, which, by the way, was the same one used for the talk show, and the expectation of a fight is just in the air. The architecture requires it.
I have to admit, I was so hooked on that kind of drama growing up. When the show was at its peak, I found it totally compelling. I'd watch it and judge everyone, thinking, at least my life isn't that chaotic.
I was the same. I watched some of the early Judge Jerry episodes, too. I was definitely looking for that visceral hit of scandal. But I always had that feeling after, that kind of metallic, gross feeling for having consumed it.
You're describing the moral hangover, the hangover that comes from consuming vicarious embarrassment. We feel superior, but we secretly know we're the ones fueling the engine with our attention. That guilt is part of the architecture, too. We're all implicated with a circus. Okay, so let's shift gears completely to maybe the most bizarre, ironic piece of this entire legacy, its transformation into high art. I'm talking about Jerry Springer. The opera. It is the ultimate cultural paradox, right? The show that TV Guide called the worst in television history becomes this award-winning, critically acclaimed high art musical, only in the 21st century.
It debuts in London in 2003, and it's an immediate smash hit. It won 4 Laurence Olivier Awards, including Best New Musical. I mean, the level of acclaim for a show based on televised brawls is just... it's astonishing.
And the structure is just genius in its absurdity. Act I is the talk show. You have guests like Dwight, who's cheating on his girlfriend, and Montel, who has a fetish for dressing like an adult baby.
Right. And it ends with the warm-up guy, who is secretly Satan, accidentally shooting Jerry, as you do.
And then it just pivots into this theological insanity. Acts 2 and the 3rd are in purgatory and then hell, where Jerry has to host a special episode with God, Jesus, Mary, Adam, and Eve as his guests. They're all fighting about the creation story.
And Jesus, in this perfect ironic twist, looks just like the adult baby guest, Montel.
And that level of sacrilegious absurdity is what ignited this massive controversy when the BBC aired the opera in 2005. It got 55,000 complaints, a record for British TV, all driven by this organized campaign from Christian groups.
It went beyond just complaints. They tried to prosecute the head of the BBC for blasphemy. They argued the show was this offensive, spiteful, systematic mockery of Christian belief.
They were saying the BBC was enabling the moral decay that Springer represented. But the courts were like, no, in context, this is clearly a satire of exploitative TV, not an attack on religion.
And the final layer of irony is how the critics use the same sensational tactics as the show itself. They claimed the opera had 8,000 obscenities.
That number was everywhere, but the actual BBC investigation found like 96 uses of fuck. They got to 8,000 by multiplying the number of curses by the 33 people in the chorus singing them at the same time.
So the critics, to condemn the spectacle, became just as spectacle-driven as the thing they were attacking. It's a perfect mirror of the attention economy. Outrage equals engagement.
But what did Jerry himself think of all this? He saw it and he called it wonderful. He said, "I only wish I'd thought of it first."
But he also said it was awkward and uncomfortable to watch. And the sources say he asked for 2 lines to be changed. The first was just a minor detail about his 1975 re-election, but the second one gives you this profound insight into his actual moral core. He objected to a philosophical line spoken in hell: "Nothing is wrong and nothing is right."
Yeah. He asked them to remove it. He said, "I would not say that. The Holocaust was wrong."
And there it is. The deep, dark shadow of his family history is his ultimate ethical anchor. After moderating moral chaos for 27 seasons, he was comfortable with the mess, but not with moral relativism. He was saying, I could profit from chaos, but I know some things are just objectively evil.
It reveals the serious man under the facade. That deep desire for something to be definitively right or wrong is such a sharp contrast to the glib, chaotic world he moderated every day.
And I think that tension is what leads us to the universal thing he captured, which is the Jerry Springer moment.
That intense, universal human need for your 15 minutes of being the absolute center of the world, no matter how shameful the secret is. What the show captured and what the opera magnified is that the need to be witnessed, to be seen, it transcends all cultural divides. Everybody wants their truth aired.
It's the need to be seen, even if you hate the reflection staring back at you.
Mm-hmm.
And that need is what we're now dealing with on a global digital scale.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we assess this whole complicated legacy? His final professional act was returning to his law roots with Judge Jerry.
Yeah, he hosted that from 2019 to 2022, legally binding arbitration back to his Northwestern training. And it was filmed in the exact same studio complex in Stanford as the talk show. The environment was already steeped in the spectacle.
My analytical take is he never really left the spectacle. He just changed the suit for a judge's robe. He was still relying on antagonism for ratings. The show was renewed with the explicit goal of finding more outrageous and entertaining cases to cut costs and get attention. The need for drama was still the engine.
But the supreme irony is that Judge Jerry was canceled in 2022, not because it failed, but because the market for spectacle had become totally saturated.
Right.
The show that pioneered trash TV was made redundant by the very world it helped create. Analysts said platforms like TikTok now offer unlimited small bursts of trash that make the old hour-long format pointless. The market for lowbrow conflict became infinite.
The architect was overthrown by his own creation.
Yeah.
It's almost poetic. But what did Springer himself think about it all? He admitted, if a legacy is what you're best known for, obviously I'm best known for The Crazy Show.
And he defended it till the end. He argued he wasn't glamorizing anything. He was just holding up a mirror to real human nature. He kept saying, we're all alike. We just dress better.
But I think the most crucial and maybe the most genuine piece of his legacy, the thing that works as a counterpoint to all the chaos, is his sign-off.
Yeah.
After all the screaming, the chair throwing, the brawls that needed 5 ex-cops to contain, he would look right at the camera and he would say, take care of yourselves and each other.
Right. And that sign-off, delivered right to you, it felt like a genuine, crucial guardrail in a world that he had helped strip of all its boundaries. It was this moment of moral recalibration. After inviting us all into the chaos, he gave this simple, essential reminder of community and decency.
It's the moment the ringmaster steps out of the cynical architecture and reminds us of the serious man who started as an idealist, who was rooted in this memory of profound tragedy.
He was saying, this is entertainment, but remember the human cost, and remember how to find stability.
He left the chaos as a mirror, but the sign-off was the instruction manual for how to clean up the reflection.
And that manual is more relevant now than ever.
So let's leave you with this final thought. If the Jerry Springer Show was made redundant because platforms like TikTok now offer that stream of unlimited small bursts of trash, meaning the spectacle is everywhere all the time, has the original architecture of spectacle just been internalized? When we compulsively consume digital humiliation and outrage on our phones, are we now the producers, the directors, and the star guests of our own chaotic, emotional public sphere, with no security guards and no one left to say, take care of yourselves and each other? Something to chew on as you scroll tonight.